This is a story about a river that once united a people and later divided them. On one side of that river today is Kinshasa, capital of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. On the other side is Brazzaville, capital of the Republic of the Congo. Two countries, two flags, two governments, two passports. But one name, Congo. And one question, why? Why are there two Congos sitting side by side, facing each other across the water, but living such different years? To answer that, we have to go back, not just to independence in 1960, not just to the Berlin Conference in the 1880s. We have to go back even further to when Congo was not yet Congo, and no one in Europe had any idea what Central Africa even looked like on a map. Part 1. Before there were two Congos. Long before there was a Belgium, long before France claimed French Congo, there was a powerful African kingdom along the Atlantic coast and the Great River, the Kingdom of Kongo. It covered parts of what is today northern Angola, western DR Congo, the Republic of Congo, and southern Gabon. The people, the Bakongo, shared language, traditions, spiritual beliefs, and trade networks. Communities on both sides of today's border were part of the same political and cultural world. In the late 1400s, the Portuguese arrived by sea. At first, the contact was about trade and Christian mission. The king of Congo was even converted to Christianity and took the name Afonso. But soon, the main business became slaves. The Atlantic slave trade pulled Congo into a violent global economy. Human beings from the interior were captured, marched to the coast, and sold into ships. Over time, this trade weakened the Congo kingdom. Internal wars, shifting alliances, and European interference slowly broke down old structures of power. But even then, no one along the river imagined that one day there would be two different Congos, with two different colonial masters. That idea came from Europe. Part 2. Berlin, when lines were drawn without Africans. In 1884 to 1885, European powers gathered at the Berlin Conference. Their goal was simple and brutal: to agree on how to divide Africa between themselves, to avoid fighting each other. No African ruler sat at the table. No Bakongo chief was consulted. Men in suits in a cold European city decided borders for tropical lands. They barely understood. One of the most aggressive players there was King Leopold II of Belgium. He was not satisfied with small Belgium. He wanted a big African territory to make his fortune and boost his prestige. Through a mix of lobbying, lies, and clever diplomacy, he convinced the other powers to recognize his control over a huge area in Central Africa. This land became the Congo Free State, but it was not free, and it was not really a state in the modern sense. It was Leopold's personal property. At the same time, France secured control over the land north of the Great River. This became French Congo, later part of French Equatorial Africa. Its capital would be Brazzaville, named after the Italian-French explorer Pierre Savognin de Brazza. So with a few strokes of the pen in Berlin, the north bank of the river went to France. The south bank went to Leopold of Belgium. One river, two colonial systems. This is the original moment when the idea of two Congos is born. Part 3. Leopold's Terror and the Belgian Colonial Model. Under Leopold, the southern side of the river became one of the most horrific places on earth. The world wanted rubber for bicycles, cars, Industry. Leopold wanted money. The Congolese paid the price. Villages were forced to collect wild rubber. Men who failed to meet quotas were whipped, shot, or had their hands cut off as proof that bullets had not been wasted. Women and children were taken as hostages. People were chained, starved, beaten, and killed. Entire communities were destroyed. Historians estimate that millions died. Some say 10 million. Others say even more. Whatever the exact number, it was a population collapse of incredible scale. This violence was not an accident. It was the foundation of Leopold's business model. He became rich. Belgium's elite became rich. The Congolese became corpses or broken survivors. By 1908, international pressure grew too strong. The Belgian state took the territory away from Leopold and turned it into a former colony, the Belgian Congo. The obvious massacres were reduced, but the system remained deeply exploitative. The colony existed to serve Belgium's needs: rubber, copper, uranium, diamonds, palm oil. Education was extremely limited. At independence in 1960, the entire Belgian Congo had only a tiny number of African university graduates. Political training for Congolese elites was almost non-existent. Belgium wanted workers and clerks, not true partners. This development without empowerment is crucial for understanding why the DRC later suffered so much chaos. It had resources, but weak institutions, and very little experience of self-government. Part 4. The French system. Assimilation, but still control. On the other side of the river, under French rule, the story was different in style, but similar in purpose. The French talked about a civilizing mission. They claimed they wanted to turn Africans into Frenchmen in black skin, loyal to the Republic. In practice, this meant a small African elite educated in French language and culture, a centralized administration controlled from Paris, harsh forced labor for big projects like plantations, and the Congo Ocean Railway. That railway, built between 1921 and 1934, cost tens of thousands of African lives. Workers died of exhaustion, disease, accidents, and abuse. People were recruited by force from the interior and sent to die for a line of steel that would move timber and goods to the coast. Still, compared to the Belgian Congo, the French Congo had a somewhat larger group of locals who had experience in administration and politics. Brazzaville became an important regional center. It even served during World War II as the symbolic capital of Free France under General de Gaulle for a time. Though by the mid-20th century, when African independence movements were rising, the Belgian Congo had deep trauma, an economy built on extraction, and a very weak African administrative class. The French Congo had its own brutal past, but a slightly more developed African elite and a tighter, ongoing connection to Paris. Two very different starting points for two countries that share a name. Part 5. The Double Independence of 1960. Now we return to 1960, the year of African independence, the year when the question, "What is Congo?" became urgent. On June 30th, 1960, the Belgian Congo became independent as the Republic of the Congo, with its capital at Leopoldville, later renamed Kinshasa. Patrice Lumumba became Prime Minister. Joseph Kasavubu became President. On August 15th, 1960, just weeks later, French Congo also became independent. It too called itself the Republic of the Congo, with its capital at Brazzaville. So for a while, both countries had the same name. To avoid confusion, people started saying Congo Leopoldville later Congo-Kinshasa, for the ex-Belgian one, Congo-Brazzaville for the ex-French one. From the very first day, the differences between the two were visible. In Leopoldville, independence was emotional, explosive, and tense. The army mutinied within days, angry that white Belgian officers still commanded them, and that Africans were still treated as children. Belgian settlers panicked and fled. Foreign powers watched closely, worried about their business interests and about the Cold War balance. Congo-Brazzaville, independence was more calm and controlled. France had prepared the transition in a way that protected its influence. French troops stayed. French advisors stayed. French companies kept their economic power. The ruling African elite was deeply connected to France. Already, you can see the pattern. The Southern Congo, DRC today, steps into independence as a giant unstable territory with weak local institutions and many eyes on its minerals. The Northern Congo, Rossi today, steps into independence as a smaller, more manageable state still tightly tied to Paris. The seeds of divergence are fully planted. Part 6, Lumumba, Foreign Intervention and the Rise of Mobutu. The crisis in the southern Congo came fast. Within weeks, the Force Publique, the army, mutinied. The mineral-rich province of Katanga, under Moise Tshombe, declared cessation, backed by Belgian mining interests. Belgium sent in troops without agreement from Lumumba's government. Lumumba turned to the United Nations first, asking for help to keep the country together. The UN sent peacekeepers, but refused to fight the secessionists by force. Lumumba then looked to the Soviet Union for military assistance. This was during the Cold War, when the world was divided between the US-led capitalist bloc and the USSR-led socialist bloc. A large, mineral-rich African country, turning to Moscow, was a nightmare for Washington, Brussels, and Paris. Western intelligence agencies saw Lumumba as a threat to their economic and strategic interests. In September 1960, President Kasavubu dismissed Lumumba. Lumumba in turn dismissed Kasavubu, creating a political stalemate. Then, a man who had been standing quietly in the background made his move. Colonel Joseph Désiré Mobutu. With support from Western powers and parts of the army, he staged a coup. Lumumba was arrested, handed to his enemies in Katanga, and murdered in January 1961, with Belgian involvement and CIA knowledge. Lumumba's death became a symbol. For Africans, he was the young leader killed for daring to demand real independence. For the Congo, it was the moment foreign interference and local ambition combined to shut down a democratic path. Mobutu would go on to rule, directly or indirectly, for more than 30 years. Part 7, Zaire, Strongman Rule and the Deepening Gap. In 1965, Mobutu took full power. Later, he renamed the country Zaire and launched a campaign called Authenticity, changing names of cities, encouraging African dress, and presenting himself as the father of the nation. Behind the show was a simple reality. Mobutu's regime was a kleptocracy. That means ruled by thieves. The state was used as a personal cash machine. Zaire had huge resources: copper, cobalt, diamonds, gold, uranium. But instead of building a strong, fair system, Mobutu and his circle looted the country's wealth. He built palaces, kept exotic animals as pets, and lived like a king while ordinary people walked on roads full of potholes and endured failing hospitals and schools. For the West, during the Cold War, Mobutu was still useful. He was anti-communist, and Zaire was strategically important. So Western governments supported him, forgiven his abuses, in exchange for his political alignment. During these decades, Kinshasa became a massive, chaotic city, famous for its music, style, and energy, and infamous for corruption, shortages, and political repression. Across the river, Congo-Brazzaville followed a different script. After some early instability, it became, in 1969, Africa's first officially Marxist-Leninist state, aligned with the Soviet Union and Cuba. The ruling party, the Congolese Party of Labor, PCT, and leaders like Marien Ngouabi, then later Denis Sassou Nguesso, ran a one-party state. So by the 1980s, south of the river, Zaire, pro-Western, anti-communist, capitalist on paper, but economically collapsing under corruption. North of the river, People's Republic of the Congo, pro-Soviet, socialist on paper, but also corrupt and authoritarian. Two Congos, two systems, two camps. The river was not only a border, it was an ideological line. Part 8, the 1990s, the fall of Mobutu, wars and civil conflict. The end of the Cold War changed everything. Without the East-West global struggle, Mobutu lost his strategic importance. Western governments started to criticize his human rights abuses and corruption more openly. Inside Zaire, the economy was collapsing and resentment was rising. In 1994, the genocide in Rwanda sent millions of refugees and armed groups into eastern Zaire. The situation became explosive. In 1996 to 1997, a rebel alliance led by Laurent Désiré Kabila and backed by Rwanda and Uganda marched across the country and overthrew Mobutu. Zaire became the Democratic Republic of the Congo again. Many hoped this was a new beginning, but very quickly a new war broke out. The Second Congo War, sometimes called Africa's World War, ran from 1998 to the early 2000s. It involved the DRC government, rebels backed by Rwanda and Uganda, forces from Angola, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and others. Millions died, mostly from hunger and disease. Parts of the DRC became zones of permanent insecurity, especially in North and South Kivu. Across the river, Congo-Brazzaville was also in crisis. In 1997, a civil war broke out between forces loyal to President Pascal Lissouba and those loyal to former President Denis Sassou Nguesso. With help from Angola, Sassou Nguesso returned to power. He has remained in power ever since. Both countries came out of the 1990s with deep scars, but their positions were not the same. The DRC was a giant country broken by war, full of armed groups and foreign interests in its minerals. The Republic of Congo was a smaller oil state, authoritarian but relatively more stable, with strong ties to France. The divide had widened. Part 9, France, oil, and the Brazzaville system. To understand why Congo-Brazzaville looks more stable today than its neighbor, even though it is authoritarian, you have to look at France. France has kept strong influence over many of its ex-colonies through currency. The CFA franc system, where 14 African countries keep a large part of their foreign reserves in the French treasury, and their currency is tied to the euro. Military. French soldiers have intervened many times to support friendly regimes. Politics. Leaders like Sassou Nguesso in Congo and the Bongo family in Gabon have had close personal ties to French political and business elites. In Brazzaville, oil money flows into the state. A lot of it is stolen or misused, but because the population is small, around 6 million in the whole country, average living conditions can still look better than in the DRC, one which has more than 100 million people. So you have this picture. Brazzaville, oil, CFA franc, strongman president with French backing, fewer people, slightly better average indicators in health and infrastructure, but very little political freedom. Kinshasa, huge population, incredible resource wealth, but constant conflict in the east, weak central control, and a long history of looting by elites. This is why, when people compare the two Congos, they often say, Brazzaville is smaller and more orderly. Kinshasa is larger and more chaotic. But both are still dealing with the same original problem, a system built to extract wealth for others. Part 10. Today. One name, two realities. Today, if you stand on the riverfront in Kinshasa at night, you can see the lights of Brazzaville across the water. You might think it must be easy to go there, but it is not. To cross, you need a passport, a visa, money for the ferry, time to deal with border controls that can be slow, suspicious, and sometimes corrupt. For a long time, even phone calls between the two cities were crazy. As Mo Ibrahim highlighted, a call often had to go through Europe and back and cost several dollars a minute. For two cities only a few kilometers apart, this was insane. His company and others later helped fix the technical side, but the political side remains. People on both sides share many things: language, Lingala, French, culture, music, fashion, food, history, the old Bakongo roots, the colonial trauma. But they do not share a common state, and they no longer share a common political project. The DRC is focused on ending wars in the east, controlling rebel groups like M23, trying to get a fairer deal for its cobalt, coltan, and other minerals. The Republic of Congo is focused on managing oil revenues, keeping the regime in power, balancing relations with France, China, and other partners. The result is that the two countries look at each other cautiously, not as natural partners in a joint project called Congo, but as neighbors whose internal problems might spill over the border. Part 11. Why they struggle to see each other's face. Why can the two Congos not truly see each other's face as brothers? We can sum it up in a few key points. Different colonial histories. Belgium's model in the south left behind very weak local institutions and a legacy of extreme violence. France's model in the north left behind slightly stronger administrative structures and a tight monetary and political link to Paris. This meant that at independence, the two sides were walking into the future with very different tools and support systems. Different paths during the Cold War. Zaire, DRC, became a pro-Western, anti-communist strongman state under Mobutu. Congo-Brazzaville became a pro-Soviet, Marxist-Leninist state under Sassou and others. For decades, each side was told the other's ideology was dangerous. That kind of narrative does not disappear overnight. Different economic structures. The DRC's wealth is in many types of minerals, scattered across a huge territory, easy to capture by rebel groups and foreign armies. The ROC's wealth is mainly in oil, which is easier for a central government to control and sell. This makes the DRC much more prone to internal wars over resources, foreign influence, and security fears. The DRC suspects its neighbors of supporting rebels or trying to control its resources. The Arok fears that instability from Kinshasa could spill over. Each side thinks, my neighbor might be a problem for my security, identity, and prestige. Both claim to be Congo. Both are proud. Each one, in some way, wants to be seen as the real Congo. Cooperation requires humility and trust, and those are hard to find after more than a century of division and violence. Part 12. The River and the Bridge. There have been plans for a physical bridge between Kinshasa and Brazzaville. A massive project to connect road and rail, making it possible to drive across the river in minutes. On paper, it looks logical. Trade would increase. People could move more easily. The two economies could integrate more. But politics is stronger than concrete. Some in the DRC fear that easier crossing would flood their markets with goods from the north, or make it easier for people to leave. Some in the Arok fear uncontrolled migration from Kinshasa's huge population. And both sides worry about security and control. So far, the bridge remains mostly a dream. The river remains the old border. Not impossible to cross, but always reminding both sides that history has built two separate states here. Part 13. The big picture. When you look at a map, the two Congos look like a mistake. Two Congos, two capitals facing each other across a narrow strip of water. It feels like something a student might do wrong on a geography test. But it is not a mistake. It is a result. A result of the Berlin Conference, Leopold's private empire, French assimilation policies, the Cold War, coups, wars, and long presidencies, external powers who cared more about resources than about people. The people on both sides of the river did not choose to be divided by it. But they have spent more than a century being shaped by different systems, different pressures, and different fears. Today, the two Congos remain tied together by history and separated by power. Kinshasa looks across and sees a smaller, more stable cousin with oil and French backing. Brazzaville looks across and sees a giant neighbor full of potential and danger, a mirror of what can happen when a rich country is continuously exploited and destabilized. The river flows between them, carrying fishing boats, barges, and memories. It knows that long before Europe, there was only one Congo. It also knows that long after today's leaders are gone, people on both sides will still draw water from its banks. Whether the two Congos will ever truly come closer, politically, economically, emotionally, is an open question. But to understand why they stand apart today, you only need to remember this. The line between them was drawn far away by people who never intended Africa to be one. And the work of healing has barely begun.